We get to speak about our problems and our feelings that we having in the classroom. We get to show the teacher how she is, and she show us how we are. We used to call people names all the time. I used to make fun of the kids a whole bunch, but I stopped because I see it hurt people's feelings.
It has made things better around here because it solved lots of problems, like fights or cursing or stuff like that.
I used to always mess with other students in the classroom. Now that we be having these meetings, I stopped. We all become closer friends. I think they're great. People used to call me names all the time, and now they stop calling me names.
Protests pretty much ran my life, and I didn't even realize it. I would do things that would hurt me because I wanted to protest against my parents.
I learned how to express my emotions, like anger, with talking to people instead of bottling up inside of myself.
I am so excited to have as my guest this evening Judy Ryan, who is the owner of Expanding Human Potential, a training and consulting firm that specializes in creating environments in which encouragement, support, and harmony between people becomes a predominant experience, interactive, democratic models that increase personal responsibility, self-control, intrinsic motivation, positive social interest, and cooperation. I'd like to ask you first, what is the process of redirection? How do you use it? When is it appropriate? What is it all about?
I am so happy to be here, Beth. All misbehavior is based on discouragement. So a misbehaving person is a discouraged person. So what discourages people? It's usually the way we've set up the culture. Everything that we're doing in our life is in relationship to the social order, what's going on, how an individual feels they belong. And based on that are 4 core needs that each person needs in abundance to feel good about themselves, to function fully. I like to think of it as if you imagine people on a ship and they didn't know that they needed to have vitamin C and they contracted scurvy. Well, that's what these core needs are to us as human beings. The need to feel powerful, which is the need to feel influential, the need to feel lovable and likable, the need to feel connected, and the need to feel that what they do makes a difference, that they can make a contribution. And what happens is that when we raise families and when we operate in schools and when we operate in corporations, we aren't necessarily focused on meeting those 4 core needs.
We can't do what we are charged to do unless we have the kids ready to accept what we're charged to do.
When parents hit their kids, I just don't like it because then they're being mean to their kids. Instead of working out the solution, they're just hitting their kids because they think it's only right for the parents to have their way. So they just hit the kids instead of letting the kids have some of their way or letting them both have their way.
Some of the practices I was doing in class were not really the best method of dealing with children. And with this program, I'm learning how to help children manage their own behavior.
I love the program. I think that as an individual teacher, what I like is that I have those kids that are leaders anyway. They love the classroom meetings, and it gives those kids an opportunity to express their feelings openly, and it also gives the kids a chance to see other kids and hear other kids' opinions about what's going on in their school. It's a great program. I think the program is just fantastic. I think of changing anything. I like the way it's going.
It takes a great deal of effort to deal with every single behavioral problem, and when kids are assuming some of that responsibility themselves, it makes it easier for teachers. Teachers need to feel that they're capable of making a difference. They need strategies that work. They need strategies that they can utilize and try out in the real arena. When kids feel really engaged, involved, they'll produce, they'll be creative. I think teachers are very enthusiastic about what they're learning, and they're not just taking the information in, they're actually using it. They're learning from their kids as well. It's a two-way street. The organization of the classroom, for example, what kind of rules will we have? How will we handle situations that come up? Kids will have something to say about that, and I think teachers will laugh all the way to the bank because that's really beneficial to them in a meaningful way.
So what happens is that people become discouraged, and in that discouragement, that's when misbehavior takes place. Redirect is when a person is trained to understand what the purposes of the misbehavior are, so that person on the receiving end of the misbehavior can actually have a stronger influence on what's occurring in the interaction. There are patterns that if you observed the goals of behavior and you recognize the goals of misbehavior, they tended to fall into 5 different particular patterns. And those 5 mistaken goals are the goal of undue attention, the goal of power, where a person gets into power struggles. The 3rd mistaken goal is the goal of revenge. That's where the person believes that they can't fit in, they can't be liked, and that the only way that they matter or that they connect is by hurting others. The 4th mistaken goal is the goal of assumed inadequacy. This is when somebody is very discouraged and they just believe that they can't do anything right, so why try? And then the 5th mistaken goal is the goal of significance, and that's the goal where a person really on some deep level believes that they're not significant enough, and so they actually act superior so that they can cover their feeling of inferiority. And so redirect is where you can begin to identify what mistaken goal is that other person operating out of. And when you become adept at becoming aware of that mistaken goal, then you can take the appropriate redirect. And what's great about redirect is it's not the typical response to misbehavior. When people misbehave, we tend to get very influenced by that misbehavior, and we actually end up doing things that are counterproductive to the very thing that we want to accomplish.
What I've seen is a positive difference because of how I react to the students. Instead of reacting to what they're doing, I'm responding and trying to figure out why they're doing it. And I think that has helped them in dealing with their problems because I'm dealing with them in a different way. I'm having to retrain myself. I've fallen into some bad habits, so I have to catch myself. But when I catch myself, the only frustration I feel is, why didn't I go to the program? Definitely it's changed me. I'm a fairly new teacher, and I didn't receive a lot of training on behavior. It's very easy to implement, and it's easy for the kids to handle. It's just very simply responding to their behavior, and it's definitely changed me.
If a kid is acting out, kind of step back and think, well, what's the reason why he or she's acting out? And then that gives me a better idea of how I can deal with it and kind of see it from their perspective. They may have a good reason why they're acting out, and then I need to handle that a little bit differently than just handing out consequences.
This program has taught me that I don't know as much as I thought I knew. You know, I've been around for 31 years, and it would seem that you've seen everything and heard everything, but there's some things that I don't know, even with all that experience. I have a group that I meet with on a monthly basis called the Principal's Advisory Council, and that's like 2 students from every classroom. And we sit and talk about problems that are going on in the school that I see, problems that are going on that they see. We kind of get pretty close when we meet in that PAC, Principal Advisory Council. But the thing about it was they were just talking to me. But what I like most is that in this program, every teacher gets a chance to do what I did with 60 children.
It's changed me in dealing with children. As far as the redirecting behaviors are excellent, and finding the mistaken goals and understanding those. Oh, it's changed a lot.
I've seen a positive change. I've seen the kids respond better to all the staff. I attended all the meetings also, and as a result, I learned a lot too. We went through 25 hours of training. I got the same training as the staff did, and it helped me to understand my staff better, and the staff saw me a little differently then too. Anytime you can empower staff or kids, it makes a difference.
Our normal inclination is to strike back, to rear back in defense and protect ourselves, or to run. Those are the kinds of things that we do when we're under attack. We don't recognize people's private logic. There's always private logic going on, even when it seems the most confusing or mysterious to us. They're actually trying to influence confirmation of their mistaken goal. And that's not conscious to any of us that are misbehaving generally. So what happens is when we give that, there are specific results from that. You will see certain reactions that occur. But instead, if you get the redirect, you'll also have a different set of outcomes.
One of the issues that was getting in my way was blaming. And in this coursework, it helped me look inside and get some insight as to where those things were tripping me up and causing problems.
the behavior is getting better, despite the traditional ways. And I think this gives another turn because it has given me the opportunity to identify different goals and things that the students want and ways for me to deal with the students. I've actually implemented some of the techniques learned during the workshops at home with my own son, just trying to implement some of the things that I've learned at home to using it all around.
Well, let me tell you about one of my students that was on the edge of either graduating or dropping out. She was able to graduate, be successful, and she was finally in control of herself and also willing to take accountability for her own actions.
Culture is everything. The reason for redirect, and the reason we will probably always need tools like redirect, is because there's such an important need to have those 4 core needs met. The need to feel powerful, lovable, connected, contributing.
It's made me feel good because I like to talk, to try to solve the problems, to help out by trying to give them a solution.
I've definitely seen a major improvement in my classroom. I was skeptical at first, I have to say, but the kids have come together and really help each other out in a way I was just not expecting at all. I've seen discipline improve. I've seen teamwork gel better. They work much better together now. They're quick to help each other out, whereas before they may have been reluctant to give suggestions to each other. I think I was expecting maybe it to just be a very subtle thing where I wasn't going to notice, but I have definitely noticed, and other teachers who are using the program in our building say they've noticed also. Definitely more than I was expecting. Very positive.
I live in hopes that we'll be able to really spread it all the way across the board. We're seeing the result in a number of ways. Children are beginning to come up with some ideas that teachers feel are important. We've seen the sense of responsibility among kids, and it's been positive, both on the part of the students, but it's the teachers as well. So I've had teachers report on particular kids who they feel have really taken off with it. The change in me is just a renewed hope that we can get kids off on a better footing, and the degree to which we can do that, I really feel empowered. When that's spread throughout the building, then we're going to see something that will carry over not only for the building, but into the home with parents. And the program has a component that involves parents. And so this is a circle that's ever widening. It keeps going out, and nobody knows where that'll end.
One of my favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein, and he said, "The significant problems cannot be solved at the same level of thinking that we were at when we created them." From the time we were little, we were taught to go into the filing cabinet of the problems themselves. We weren't given papers at school that said all the things we got right on them. Like all the little X's weren't saying, here's what you got right. They were all the X's saying what you got wrong. So from the time we were little, we all were taught to believe that the way you solve the problems is to look at the problems themselves. And that's actually the opposite of the best way to solve a problem. Look at the places where things worked well, where you had successes. Be responsible for the energy and the thought processes and the way that those thought processes begin in the beginning of a meeting, around problem solving, as they start their workday. So what we do is we teach people how to begin to take responsibility for their thoughts and how to access their more positive memories.
The class meetings are real good because we can practice how to solve problems. And then when kids do have a problem and I call them aside, then they have some idea of how to go about solving it with my help. I have seen a positive difference in my kids. They generally seem to be nicer to each other, and a lot of them look at things from each other's perspective, or they're better at doing that. The kids seem to be more cooperative with each other and more willing to help each other out. They take it upon themselves and solve more problems on their own, like on the playground.
The students are starting to take ownership. The program is very positive because right now we're trying to find different ways to improve classroom behavior, and I think this gives some things that the students want and ways for me to deal with the students. I would recommend the program to other schools because I think it's an important aspect, and if it's implemented in each classroom, then we have the opportunity to see some positive changes within the students.
We don't fight as much anymore because we let it out during our discussions, and also we have the same opinions, so we kind of talk a little bit more about our opinions.
The teachers have been surprised at some of the answers the children have come up with, some of the solutions, some of the discussions. They're getting more out of the children than they really thought they would.
I've seen a big difference in my students. They're more outgoing, they're more cooperative with each other, they're getting along better. They seem to be more focused now on their education. I enjoy my kids more. I'm thinking back, 2 or 3 years ago when I had kids. And when you get to about this 9th month of school, then the kids have made some changes. But these kids have really gone through a big change.
It seems like this really has a lot of connection to our whole educational system and our process. Like you were indicating, this starts when we're really young. How can you use some of the techniques into our educational system?
The company to date has worked in over 60 schools in the St. Louis area. So we do a lot of work in schools, and we do a lot of work with families. In fact, I'll just tell you a little story that's one of the most powerful stories. One of my instructors was actually abducted over the holidays at gunpoint. She was held up in the Central West End. Some of your listeners may have read this paper. Anyway, she used some of the skills that we teach, and that she particularly works with teachers and has been a teacher herself. And she used her classroom management skills of connecting, visualization, and appreciative inquiry type of process that we use, and the redirect tool with her abductor. And he, over just several hours, released her. And when he released her, she was unharmed, and he actually was penitent and cried. And she said in part of the conversations they had, he started to open up to her about his problems with his children, and she started to give him some advice and, talk to him about some things, and really created closeness rather than distance with him. We've had some environments that have been deficiently challenged schools and, poor academically graded schools, and they'll say, well, I don't know if this will work in our situation. She's a great person to send in for that kind of thing, because she can say, hey, I can do it at gunpoint. I think you all can handle it. So.
The facilitator for our workshop did an excellent job of drawing people in, making people want to participate, and I think that encouraged people to participate actively.
The trainers were very, very good at working with us. They just put hours and hours into our training and definitely made us really understand how we were supposed to utilize the program.
The support teachers that have come and observed my class and offered constructive criticism have been fantastic. I wish I could have them in my class every day because I know I would be shaped quicker. They have been very positive, but also they challenge you and they question you. They just don't take your answer and say, okay, that's it. They really make you think about it. They really probe and ask you really deep questions, and because they do that, you're going to change. They want to be satisfied that you really get it, and that has been fantastic. Very, very good support people. All the trainers have been excellent. They put you into the program rather than just sitting there talk. They get you up and get you active, and I think that's what's good about the programs.
We underestimate the capabilities of children. What happens is if you don't replace punishment and reward when people misbehave, we'll keep going back to the default. And the problem with punishment and reward, because we all do punishment and reward when we get stressed out, when we get confronted with difficulties, all of those responses are control-based responses, and all of them have a high price tag to them. They all are counterproductive to our primary goal. We want reliable, that are on time to work, that are cooperative with us, that are actually proactively working to help and support. And if we're doing behaviors toward them that make them angry and frustrate them and hurt them, we won't get that long range. We won't get that reliable, hardworking, loyal, and caring that we want. That's very interested in the needs of the whole group.
There's stars, super good, fair, needs improvement, and I didn't like those marks because when people move their star down, I think I know how they felt. They felt like there was the only one bad. They feel unhappy because they have to do it in front of the class. And usually the class stare at them. And it doesn't feel fun because I know how it felt. It makes me feel very sad. I felt like I was nothing but glued to the side of badness.
I used to get in a lot of fights with my dad. I can actually have fun with my dad now.
I'm so excited I've taken other classes where they just tell you stuff. I wasn't going to take this. I don't want to waste my time. So even though it was a lot of hours and we were supposed to get paid and we didn't, I went ahead and did it. And I am happy now. They gave us the tools to actually implement and do it, and examples, role-playing. We're teaching them methods on dealing with their problems, and rather than calling names, putting each other down and insulting each other, they can deal with each other using their voices instead of hitting or insulting each other. This teaches them. It's not just a student-teacher relationship. It's a student-student, it's peers, it's parent, it's society, how they get a job, how they treat each other. So this is learning a lifelong skills that we're bringing in here. So definitely I would recommend it to any teacher, even teachers that have taught a long time. You're going to learn from it.
I've seen children solving their own problems instead of me solving them, and I've seen them become less punitive. I still hear some, let's give them detention or put them on the wall, but more I'm hearing, let's see if we can talk about our feelings and that type of thing. And those aren't skills that we had before.
I think when one child starts to assume more responsibility and be more dependable, I think there's a carryover. I think they influence each other in a positive way. Kids feel capable, they're connected, they know that they're involved in something very real, and everybody's a winner. Things have been thought through. It's not fluff. They're life lessons, things that kids and teachers and parents learn about what they're doing and how they interact with people.
The reason rewards and punishment are so popular in our family lives and in our workplace is because they do work short term. They give us this sense of immediate compliance and control. But the problem is it doesn't create any level of commitment to the behavior at all. In fact, it works against it. It's about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators.
Yes.
Intrinsic is when people do what they do because they love it. When you reward somebody for something, they actually think in their subconscious, it mustn't be a good thing if they have paid me to do it. There's also being autocratic, measuring, and when we do those different control-based models, we hold beliefs about people. When we're rewarding people, we hold the belief that people are selfish and lazy, and you have to give them a carrot. And when you're being autocratic with people, you're holding a belief about them. Well, they can't really be trusted. I have to manage them. I have to be the boss to them. And when people are being measured, the beliefs are, people can only be trusted when I evaluate them, when I give them the carrot of my stamp of approval. And what happens is that you actually end up nurturing people that are competitive and they're conforming just to please you. They're not going to be those people that you want that are open and proactive and creative and accountable. The belief that you have to hold is that people are and like to be great, and when they're not, they're discouraged in one of those 4 core needs. The leadership approach is very different. Instead of motivating and evaluating and managing, you lead by wise counsel. You teach, and once they know, you wait for them to come to you if they need help. But you don't constantly hover and interfere and overmanage and all of those things. And what happens is people become accountable for their performance. I remember one of the most powerful examples in a school setting was a 3rd grade class that they knew that when their teacher was absent, that they were to hold a class meeting first thing in the morning so that they together could self-manage and support the substitute teacher that day.
That was in 3rd grade?
3rd graders. And that's what happens when you teach people to own their own job.
It takes a lot of time, of course. It takes a lot of time away from what we are here to do. But let me turn that around. We can't do what we are charged to do unless we have the kids ready to accept what we're charged to do. And this is the way of getting them ready. In the long run, I view it as saving time in the long run.
Once we learned how to do the classroom meetings, a number of staff began that right away. They've noticed that the kids are responding better, and there seems to be less number of problems on the playground where you have a less unstructured atmosphere, and they're working with themselves now. I've seen a positive change. I've seen the kids respond better to all the staff, mainly because I think they have an opportunity for input now through the class meetings.
I have a lot of very outspoken students who like to share their opinion, and I think that's a good thing. And I give the students the opportunity during class meetings to express things that they want to vote on that I can change to either help the class meetings or help the classroom run a little bit smoother as a whole.
The good manager is the one that can transfer responsibility in such a way that people feel their power, their lovableness, their connection, and their contribution, those 4 core needs again.
The change in me as an administrator, looking for strategies, looking for ways to not just have a good classroom. We've got good rooms. What we need is a good school. We need a school where strategies are being shared. And then when you get a critical mass of teachers in a building working pretty much in the same area, working on some of the same strategies, now we've got something that will really make an impact. Time is short, and so if they are able to pull some things together that are effective, that means they'll dig deeper, and the benefit will go all the way across the board.
I have noticed happier, more productive, and working better as a team, and consistently doing that. What I noticed was that it carried over into our work environment, and it still is very prevalent today.
One of the things they talked about is empowering the students. These are little things, but they really add up. Instead of me deciding what goes on the board, they decide what they put up on the board as far as their work. And they immediately were so excited about that. Even the lower achieving students had some kind of paper they wanted to put up. So that was nice. The agenda, they are so excited about having a forum that they can express their opinions. We put the agenda up and they write down, and anything's open. I mean, as long as it's done in a positive way. And they really, really like it. In fact, they ask for more meetings. They could have a meeting every day. In fact, recently we had a problem with another teacher. And that was brought up at the meeting, and they came up with a solution on how to deal with this teacher, and we did it today. So they saw a way to do it in a positive way. They were upset with what this teacher did, and they liked the fact that they were able to take over and solve that problem.
You can really get at what kids are really thinking and really find out a lot about your students and a lot about yourself, too. I sat in on 3 meetings, and one was from a special education classroom. And this teacher was gung-ho about it. She did not think that her children had the wherewithal to really do these kind of things, but she was fooled. And she was pleasantly fooled. She has speech and language children. That's their handicap. They can't speak really well, and they have language problems. But they were doing their best, and she was just really turned on by it.
I'm 16 years old. I'm just getting so much more enjoyment out of every day, just waking up and realizing I can be myself.
Like I said, I was a skeptic, but now I'm sold on this program. It is wonderful.
We've been speaking this evening with Judy Ryan. If you would like to learn more about her organization, go to her website, www.expandinghumanpotential.com, or you can reach her by phone at 314-878-9100.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you a story that I love that's a great way to kind of get your teeth into what is redirect all about, what is the significance of it, and how can I understand it? Because right now it just sounds like a term thrown out there, some jargon. So if any of your listeners have ever read Daniel Goleman's book on emotional intelligence, he tells a story in there that's actually given to him by a man that has trained in the art of Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art. It's actually the highest, most spiritual form of martial art. They train the practitioners to actually stay very centered, and when the sword is being lowered, they teach them how to enter into the movement and actually reach out to the attack. And your body swings around, and for an instant, you're somewhat in the shoes of your opponent. And in that moment, if you're centered and you're learning this movement fluidly, you're able to see through the eyes of your opponent. Their philosophy is that in that instant, you are one with your opponent, and so he's no longer your enemy. And when you redirect his energy, it's from a position of, you're my friend, and I want to be helpful to you, as opposed to, you're my enemy, and I want to hurt you. So this man on the train, he's been, just reared up. He's kind of a newbie in Aikido, and he's in Japan, and he's an American, so he's very much the foreigner. And he's on this very large train, and onto the train comes this drunken laborer who's very out of control, and he's very aggressive, and he starts to swear and yell and shove people, and he goes to this hole in the center of the train car, and he's trying to yank it out of the ground, and he's growling and really being offensive. And he comes over and he shoves a woman that has a newborn baby, and the people on the train are getting quite irritated and agitated, and they're moving to the other end of the train, and people are getting alarmed and starting to fight with him, argue with him. What happened is this gentleman who had been trained in Aikido, he wanted to be influential. Here was this event right in front of him, and he knew that he had been given the key to how to handle that event and how to create a certain kind of outcome, but he still was so new, he wasn't quite sure what to do. So he went to stand up because he didn't want anybody to get hurt. And the drunk, he looks over at him and he sees him and he says, you foreigner, you're the cause of all my problems. And he starts to storm over to him like he's going to take all of his wrath out on this man. Well, from the back of the train, this little old Japanese man, he's about 75 years old, he yells out in the most friendly tone, "Hey, what you drinking?" And the man kind of whips around like, who said that? And the old man, he gets up out of his seat and he walks over and he says, "What you been drinking?" And the guy says, "Sake, what's it to you anyway?" And the old man says, "Oh, I love sake. My wife and I, we heat up a little pot of sake and we go out in our garden every morning. We have the most beautiful persimmon trees in our garden. Do you like persimmon trees?" And the man goes, "Yeah, I like persimmon trees all right." And he's kind of looking at him like, what is up with this guy? And the whole time the old man's just coming over like they're best of buds. And he says, "I bet you have a great wife too." And with those words, the drunk's whole face just kind of crumpled and he started to cry. And he said, "My wife died a month ago and I started drinking again. And today I lost my job." And he has all this shame. And the old man says, "Oh my goodness, come here. You need to come sit right beside me and tell me all about it." And so they go over to the back of the train, and they sit down, and they start talking. And everybody on the train's like, whew, thank God he came along, because they didn't anticipate that he could actually get this result. Now, if you stop for just a second and think about it, if that old man had not been on the train, it's possible that people might have started to get more aggressive, that they might have tried to subdue this man and hold him down on the ground, or maybe called in the authorities. People might have even made decisions about riding on the train. Oh, trains are a dangerous place. You can't count on public transportation. All kinds of things could have resulted had the situation escalated. So you can kind of see that a lot of times an event that's right in front of us can have many different outcomes and long-range effects.
It's interesting because part of what comes to mind is that, of course, we immediately make assumptions based on what we think is going on in people's behavior. We never would have made an assumption that this person was dealing with a great deal of personal pain or personal grief and was just not able to cope with it in a more healthy fashion.
Oh, we always do. We don't recognize people's private logic. So I'll just give you an example of how this ties in with redirect. On our charts where we teach redirect, the first thing that we teach is what is the feeling that's being evoked in you, the person that is the receiver, if you will, of the misbehavior. And one of the goals that I mentioned was the goal of revenge. And the goal of revenge is never about the people around the revengeful person. Well, most all of the goals aren't really about us, but that one in particular tends to be something we'll take on personally. So the mistaken goal of revenge, what it elicits in the people that are receiving the misbehavior, is it elicits the primary feeling of shock and anger. But the anger has this quality of, how could you do this to me? It's a more extensive feeling of anger than some of the other goals. And it's almost a bewilderment. The people on that train must have felt, who is this guy? Why is he doing this to us? And what happens is that the person is actually in the belief filing cabinet, if you will, in their head of, I can't be liked, I can't fit in, people don't like me, don't care about me, nothing works for me, and the only way that I can feel connected at all is to hurt you like I'm feeling hurt. So that's the mistaken goal that they're in that moment. What their deeper need is help me, I'm hurting. But they don't look like help me, I'm hurting. They look like take me down, I'm evil. That's what they look like. But deep down inside, that's what's going on. And so what happens is they're actually trying to influence confirmation of their mistaken goal. What they're trying to influence is the result of alienation and the demand for it. So what happened is that man got most of those people on the train to alienate from him. Mm-hmm. They were getting angry with him. They were wanting to hurt him. They were wanting to withdraw from him, all forms of alienation.
He reaffirms his own mistaken goal.
Absolutely. That's what's going on. And that's not conscious to that man or any of us that are misbehaving generally. That's not conscious to us, but it's still the goal that's operating. So what happens is when we give that demanded alienation, for example, there are specific results from that. If you give the sugar, what we call the sugar, the demand, you will see certain reactions that occur. But instead, if you get the redirect, you'll also have a different set of outcomes. So what the redirect is for the goal of revenge is, first, don't take the behavior personally at all. Like that old man, he wasn't saying, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to us? He was not taking it personally. The second thing is don't retaliate in any way. And the third piece of the redirect is move in and create closeness. Now, most people would find it a little frightening to move in and create closeness with that man on the train, but that's exactly what the old man did. And then the fourth key is to do anything that you can think of to do to actually allow them to begin to express the pain. So somehow he knew that if he talked long enough, he'd get this person to kind of get at the core of what was going on. And sometimes you have to be very direct. In this situation, he happened to mention a wife, and then that kind of started the ball rolling. A lot of times when we're teaching redirect, one of the interesting things that we know that occurs is that in the moment that people understand redirect, sometimes a lot of pain comes up because all of a sudden this light goes on that says, oh my God, I've actually been giving the demanded influence. I've been actually participating in the misbehavior. And so they'll get defensive about redirect. Sometimes we'll have people say, well, you know, does this work in this kind of environment? Or I don't think this is going to work in my family or my, you know, in my company, and you don't know the people I work with. And that kind of thing will happen. And we'll actually, as instructors, have to redirect our audience in that moment. Like often what I'll say to someone is, are you mad at me about this? Right in that moment of training them. And that's the redirect for the goal of revenge. Sometimes you have to ask the question right away. You walk close to the audience, you walk close to that person, you create the closeness, and you say, hey, are you mad at me right now?
Well, I can understand from the perspective of someone who is, you know, learning about redirect even through our conversation. When you're new to this process, I would imagine your normal or typical, maybe not normal, but typical reaction, if you're bearing the brunt of someone else's revenge, is either fear that you're going to become hurt physically or emotionally, so you start putting the barriers up, and to have to totally switch your thinking around to understand where this person is truly coming from and what their needs are is a very, very different and difficult, I would imagine, process.
At first, it's almost like turning around in the Colorado River and trying to swim up the other way. It really is. Not only does it bring up your own pain about how you've been, you know, cooperating in the misbehavior, it challenges a lot of the way that we were all raised. It challenges the way we were treated. It just brings up a whole myriad of feelings. We all slip in and out of control-based ways of treating people. In fact, one of the control-based ways that surprises people is the incentive-driven ways that we sometimes try to motivate people to be good employees. And that's when we give rewards, we give incentives, and a lot of things that we think are a good way to reinforce behavior. And there's an excellent book out there called Punished by Rewards, which is written by a man named Alfie Kohn. And he cites study after study after study of how counterproductive rewarding is. And rewards can also fall into the category of praise. They've done studies where they've given actual rewards to people and where they've given praise to people, and then where they've taken the control group that doesn't receive either. And in both the praised and rewarded group, they were less committed to the behavior after the rewards and all of that were withdrawn. They were less committed than they were in the group where there was nothing offered. And there's a really funny story I'll tell about rewards that kind of helps people to keep this in mind. So there's this story that Alfie Kohn tells that I love, and it's about this little old man, and he's living in this apartment right by the school district. And these kids come by his apartment every day, and they're always yelling up at him, oh, you stinky old man, you know, they're calling him names and yelling out to him. So one day he comes out, and there's just a few of them, and he says, hey, if you guys do that for a few more minutes, I'll pay you all $1. And they're kind of surprised, and they're kind of uncertain, and they do it for a little while, and to their surprise, he comes out and he pays them all $1. And he says, now, look, I'll tell you what, if you come back at the same time, like you have been, if you're sure you come, I'll make sure that I give you all $0.25. And they kind of look at each other, well, $0.25's not as good, but all right, that's good enough. And they come back, and they bring a few additional friends, and they just heckle him, and to their surprise, he comes out, and he gives them all $0.25. Great job. And he's got the little roll of quarters, you know, and he says, okay, now if you all come back tomorrow, I don't have any more quarters, but I've got a roll of pennies, and I'll give you all a penny. And they say, a penny? Forget it. And they never came back again.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, and the reason that's a great story is because it's about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators.
Yes.
Intrinsic is when people do what they do because they love it. When those kids were heckling him, they were loving heckling. He got them to divert off of heckling so that they loved the money. And once he got them off of their original intention and he motivated them extrinsically, he was in control then. And he was able to get them to stop caring about the thing that they loved to begin with. One of the best stories that's simple that I like to relate about appreciative inquiry is they team two bowling teams, and they made a video of each bowling team, and they edited all of the mistakes or the weak bowling moves into one video, and they edited all the strengths of the other bowling team in a second video. And they asked each bowling team to watch their video for a week every day to improve their game. Well, at the end of the first week, the first team that watched all of their mistakes, they were improved as a team by 30%, which sounds pretty great. But the second team that watched all of their strengths every day, they improved as a team by 100%.
Incredible.
And they probably enjoyed watching that video a little bit more than the first group.
I would imagine.
So one of the ways that we apply appreciative inquiry is teach the managers that it's very important that they be responsible for the energy and the thought processes and the way that those thought processes begin in the beginning of a meeting, around problem solving, as they start their workday. So what we do is we teach people how to begin to take responsibility for their thoughts and how to access their more positive memories. So, for example, if you gave me a problem, Beth, the first thing I would say to you is, when have you had a similar situation and have been able to resolve it to a great result? And what would happen is, if I had a question for you like that, the first response that often happens is people say, gosh, I don't know if I have any memories of that. And it's almost as though you can picture them going into this filing cabinet that they haven't been in for years, and they have to dust off the handle and pull out that drawer, and it's a little creaky, and then all of a sudden they start remembering a few things. And what's interesting is when you observe this visually, their whole demeanor will change. As they start to access the memories of something that they had success with, their body language changes, their face lights up, they start to have like a hopeful look, their countenance changes, their speech changes. It's just amazing to watch it.
It seems like this really has a lot of connection to our whole educational system and our process. Like you were indicating, this starts when we're really young.
Right. We've been conditioned to believe that's the best and quickest route to solve problems and to grow. And you can only build on assets. You cannot build on weaknesses. It'd be the difference between me saying to you, Beth, how are you? And Beth, what's the best thing that happened to you today? One question would get a certain type of answer, and the second question, you'd be looking in the filing cabinet of all the great things that happened to you today. And that's just something that we're not used to doing. In fact, most people at first think it's too good to be true. I mean, I can learn that easily. It's almost an affront to us. We think, well, wait a minute, that can't be right. You know, we're supposed to suffer a little more than that. When I got involved in this work, one of the most powerful events that happened personally was that at the time, it was about 1992, I had 4 children. I have 5 now, but I had 4 at that time, and my youngest at that time was 4.5. And my oldest was 11. And there were 11, 9, 7, and 4.5. And we were invited to demonstrate a family meeting in front of a large audience of educators and parent trainers and so on. And what we did was we had the 4.5-year-old run the meeting, mainly because she could. You know, we wanted to be able to show that we underestimate the capabilities of children.
That's remarkable at 4.5.
Yeah. I mean, she could hold the authority of the group. She knew how to follow the agenda. She knew how to lead the voting. She knew how to delegate the roles and responsibilities, who was going to take the notes. She knew that we started every meeting with appreciation and compliments, how we ended the meetings. And what was really great was to watch all of the children interact afterwards. The audience threw a lot of questions at them. They were confident. They were good communicators. It was clear that they could share problem solving that they did. It was clear that the audience could see how those 4 core needs had really nurtured. I remember they would share how they would be given the responsibility to go shopping for the family, and they would be given the whole budget. It was like $130 or something at that time, and they would have to manage the money, and they'd have to make sure that all of the needs of the household were taken into account, and it was amazing. And the reason we did that is so that they would know that their contribution mattered.
You know what's interesting, too, just as I listen to you talk about the different experiences, what I hear is just wonderful life skill sets being taught so that people know how to deal with relationships, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with disagreement in a non-threatening way, non-aggressive way, in a really healthy way, so that when situations come up that aren't necessarily agreeable, it doesn't provoke, the fight or flight response. It provokes engagement.
Absolutely. 70% of what we do, we don't know about the part that we don't know that's functioning under our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these unconscious beliefs that are operating below the surface that we're not even aware of anymore. Those beliefs were decided very early in our lives, and they're just beliefs about men and women and relationships and power and all kinds of things, and we're still operating out of that unconscious space. And so if the more that we can become aware of how to read all of that, the
better off we are. We've been speaking this evening with Judy Ryan. Judy is a specialist in practical application of Adlerian psychology and has been working with those strategies for 20 years. As a corporate trainer, consultant, executive mentor, and coach, she also works as a conference presenter, parent educator, recently recognized as a 2003 Woman of Achievement. She's a member of the Missouri Pay It Forward Committee, organizing large-scale youth community outreach and contribution rallies, and is currently on several research projects. If you would like to learn more about her organization, go to her website, www.expandinghumanpotential.com, or you can reach her by phone at 314-878-9100.